Welcome everybody, it's Rev. We're gonna do more of an opinion video, and I'm gonna try to keep these short just because shorter videos seem to be preferable to a lot of you guys. But it's really gonna be where I see the future of Edison and more of an out there prediction on a few of the things that I've sort of done some, I guess we'll call it pattern recognition on with other card games and formats. Before we get into it, if you do like the content, subscribe. Whoa. Actually, you know what? Let me step that back. If you do or don't like the content, subscribe. How about them apples? Um, but yeah, so really what I kind of want to get into, and I'll kind of explain my reasoning of like what it is. But I've had like a few videos that I've uploaded, which I wish I had uploaded sooner. And if you don't know, like all of my videos basically come out like a month and a half after I record them for the most part, unless it's something like a tournament report. Um, so there have been a few things that I've seen that I kind of wish I'd gotten out there sooner because I feel like they were a little bit ahead of the meta, and the meta is pretty quick in terms of the adaptations. Um, like I have a video coming out now for Pile and stuff like that, um, which is a little too late. Um, but really, why I also want to do this is, it's an idea that I had actually right when I started Edison format, which was 5 to 6 months ago. And it's something that I've seen pick up a lot of steam in the recent months. So I kind of wish I had made a separate video on it. I actually do have a video of me testing a deck that incorporates this like 5 months ago. It has like 30 views, but um, what also prompted me to do this was Fraser Smith had a video that came out in the last few days by the time this gets uploaded that talked about, Upstart Goblin and kind of the role that's played in a lot of different formats. So, like my big prediction here is not to like say, oh, I want to, be ahead of everybody and, I see, the format coming out this way and if it does, come out this way that, I was ahead of my time or anything like that, but really more just to kind of stick my neck out there and take some risk and, if I'm wrong, figure out why. Um, and really to I also think give you guys my opinion on what the future of the metagame is, and I think the few like this is like again speculative, but I think if you incorporate this type of thing sooner, you're going to be ahead of the meta. Um, totally could be wrong, of course, but really it's that the cards shown on screen are way underplayed, like criminally underplayed for Edison format. Um, mostly like mostly like the upstarts like Yadas and to some degree Reckless, not so much Jar of Greed just because you don't need like this much draw power, but like upstarts like are by far the most criminally underplayed card in the format. Yada I think is good. 3 is too much for most lists just because you don't want to Yada draw into Yada. And then Greed, depending on your game plan, is just so absurdly good at 3 that like these 3 cards in some combination, depending on what your deck is, are just like, in my opinion, they just have to be the future of the format. And I have really 4 reasons why I think this is the case. And I'm going to share them with you guys. And if you disagree, you disagree. If you rebuild a list based on what I'm about to say, go for it. But um, the first thing is, I think, the most obvious in terms of pattern recognition um, for GOAT format, which is the power difference of cards in Edison. And there are certain cards in Edison and GOAT that are just head and shoulders way more powerful than other cards. Like if you think about like a lot of the limited cards, like limited spells, like Brain Control, Dust Shoot, or like archetype specific stuff like Black Whirlwind or Future Fusion, or if you like go back to GOAT format, you go like to like BLS, Pot of Greed, Delinquent Duo, like Graceful Charity, and in GOAT format, the format has basically warped around those 4 cards, and the ability to get those 4 cards quicker and the ability to cycle those 4 cards and be more resilient to those 4 cards. So the format has completely warped around those cards to get them as quick as possible. And if you don't play GOAT format, um, people are playing 2 upstarts because it's semi-limited. They're playing Jar of Greed, they're playing Decoiches, and they're of course playing, those recursion cards like Magician of Faith to reuse, Trinity as well. So the format kind of warps around those ultra powerful cards just because they have such a ridiculously high ceiling. And then the faster you get those super powerful cards, the faster you can activate Graceful Charity or Pot of Greed, and then the faster you get your second Trinity card, and then the faster you set up your graveyard to discard stuff with Charity, and then the faster you get um, your BLS. It's like this kind of pro-cyclical thing that I've talked about a lot that I think is going to be the future of where Edison falls too. Because if we're being realistic, my second point is that this is a really inconsistent format. And the difference in a game where you can resolve something like a Future Fusion or a Whirlwind on turn one, and or a Whirlwind at all, quite frankly, is night and day. Like you're probably just going to win the game. Like you're probably also not that good if you win the game either. Like this is a very high variance game, so it's kind of important to build your deck correctly and get your most powerful cards as quickly as possible. And I do foresee my first point being that this format has some cards that are just head and shoulders way more powerful than anything at all that has that's your average run of the mill Yu-Gi-Oh card in Edison. So I feel like for that reason, draw cards are heavily, heavily underutilized. I think one really good illustration of this is um, like some stuff that's been built by Ghost Rider. Um, he's used the Reckless Greeds and the Upstarts quite frequently. I think that was really smart of him. He's a GOAT format player, by the way, so you can probably see why he was able to do that. Yeah, I think he was first to do that. Um, and then, we're seeing some other Blackwing builds, which I built, months and months ago, running the Upstart Goblin and incorporating some legacies. I even have a build that has 3 Reckless Greed in it. And the crazy thing about that is that you play an upstart, and that gets you closer to your first reckless, which then gets you closer to second reckless, and then you play Yada, which gets you closer to your third. And if you win the game before you skip draw phases, that's a plus. So like you get this very pro-cyclical thing with these draw cards, which I think is very, very slept on. And ask yourself like if you would want to face down a Blackwing list that happened to have just resolved 2 reckless greeds at the same time. And that's terrifying as shit. Because the faster a Blackwing deck gets its cards, the faster you're going to die. Like even if they like have to try to remove some of your back row and then you chain reckless, you're not going minus on that. Like if they use back row removal and you chain reckless. And the other thing about reckless greed is having 2 cards now is not the same thing as having 2 cards spread out over the next 2 turns. Having 2 cards now is way better, like way better, because it gives you more flexibility, combo potential, and optionality with your plays, and you can simplify the game state um, and outgrind your opponent. So first point, power difference of cards. I think that's the big one in my opinion. When there are cards that are just frankly just too powerful in the format is eventually going to warp around it, and getting those cards as quickly as possible to sack your opponent is the best plan of action. Number 2, this is an inconsistent format. There are search cards, there's Rhoda, E-Call, Shadows, stuff like that. I guess Whirlwind, um, Gold Sark. But this format is relatively inconsistent, and being able to add consistency to an inconsistent format gives you a very, very huge advantage over your opponent. So I don't think there's really a whole lot to say about that. Like the last point, it's pretty straightforward. When a format is inconsistent, if you can be more consistent, that is going to increase your win rate a lot over a longer enough sample size. Next, conditional cards. So one thing that I've noticed with Edison is that a lot of the format's best cards do require other cards to be good. So let's just do I've been playing Black Wings and Hero Beat the most recently, so I'll just focus on those two. But like think about Hero Beat. Like you need first for your Gem Sparks, you need an alias, and then for your Hero Blast, you need an alias in the grave. Like those are both very powerful conditional cards. For your Honest to be good, you need an alias. For your Miracle Fusion, you need to set up Grave. Like all of these cards require other cards to be good. And if you just draw one of them, it's ass. Like like what are you going to do with a dead Gemspark? What are you going to do with a dead Hero Blast? What are you going to do with a dead Miracle Fusion? The answer is nothing, of course. So having those cards when they're needed in conjunction with another card is extremely important. And I think especially in something like Hero Beat, yeah, you can play the Sakier version, maybe with like divas and a bunch of bricks. Um, but if you want to like express your skill as a player, you probably need to more focus on getting the cards that are good with each other more consistently and playing your way out of different situations as opposed to just drawing like Future Fusion turn one by luck. So that just to summarize the 3 points so far is first, there's a lot of very vast power differences in certain cards. So the format, in my opinion, is going to warp around those very powerful cards. Think about stuff like Future Fusion or Black Whirlwind. Two, it's an inconsistent format, so making your deck more consistent is a huge advantage. Three, a lot of cards that are good are conditional, so I guess I'll talk about Black Wings too. Like think about when you have Whirlwind without a Black Wing, or you have Icarus attack without a Black Wing, or something like that, or you have Blizzard without something in the grave. Like all of the best cards in these top tier decks are conditional cards. They're just not independently good, most of them. Um, and then lastly is probably the least important thing, which is I think this helps your side decking plan too, because it really solves two issues, which is that in Edison, people are oversiding a lot. Like when I see people siding in like two DD Crows and like two specialized removal spells and then like two floodgates, like for a specific matchup, like that's just way oversiding. Like if you're siding in a crow and you're siding in like maybe one or two specialized removal cards, and then you're siding in like one matchup specific like floodgate, like I don't know, like a shadow imprisoning mirror, that's going to be a lot better when your deck has stuff like Upstart Goblin, Reckless Greed, and Legacy of Yada, because you're solving the issue of oversiding and getting a lot of dupes. Because side deck cards, if you draw dupes, like that's a near auto lose. Like if you draw two crows and like one of your other side deck cards, you don't have a deck anymore. Like you don't have a game plan. You just have a bunch of counters, and that's not going to win you the game. So one thing that I foresee the future of Edison being, which is a whole other separate video, is singleton sides. I think outside of like very specific cards, like maybe Fossil Dynas or like Vanity's Fiend or Rugs, like most of the cards in most sideboards should just be one-ofs. So you're going to have like 11 one-ofs or like maybe 10 one-ofs and then like some like dupes, and that's basically it. Um, the reason being for that is just because I think people are oversiding, and you can't really afford to gut your entire game plan to overside and then brick on your siding cards. Um, so that's basically it. Um, like the last point being just like these cards help you not overside, because if you have like a 35 card deck or something with like two Yada, like three Upstart, you're going to see your side cards more consistently, even if they're one-ofs, and you solve the problem of bricking on them too. So those are the four things. First, that there are massive power differences in cards in Edison. Second, it's an inconsistent format where consistency is a huge edge. Third, most cards are conditional in this format. They're not independently good. And singleton siding is the future of the format, in my opinion, too. Also pretty controversial, but that's a whole nother video. Um, so yeah, uh, I guess really, where I see like decks looking like Jar agreed, like you're not going to need these cards realistically. Like you just can't have too many draw cards, or else you're just drawing into draw cards and you're not doing anything for several turns. But I could see a lot of lists like doing like three Upstart, like two Yada, or like depending on like what your game plan is, like three Upstart, three Reckless, or like maybe like depending like on how spicy you want to get, like three Upstart, two Yada, three Reckless. But in my opinion, like these cards in some combination, depending on your deck, are just very underplayed, and I think it's going to be a lot more frequent in the format. Honestly, like half of it just being the sack factor that if you resolve two reckless greeds at the same time, you just auto win. So I don't really think there's much else to be said about that. And then when you combine it with other draw cards, the probability of that happening goes up. Then when you activate a reckless greed, like you have even a higher likelihood of getting another reckless greed. It's just absurd. So that's my opinion. Thanks for watching. Peace out, guys.